If ever there was a First Lady of local broadcasting, then Marie Bergeron holds the title exclusively. On a daily basis for decades, area listeners of KTIB and KHOM anxiously awaited her voice to sign on with the latest news and interesting guests. Let's catch up with Marie and look back at her distinguished career. One of the pure legends of the home of Thibodaux area, whose voice was heard often on KTIB as well as KHOM. Marie Bergeron, how are you today?
I'm fine. How you doing?
Well, doing all right. At least it's a dry day for a change.
Yes, it is.
Well, I'd like to know, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm the daughter of Italian immigrant truck farmers, and I always dreamed of being on the radio, and I had to come to Thibodaux to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, before you came, did you go to college before?
No, I went to, Keegan School of Radio Broadcasting and Television. This is only the second time I've ever admitted that. The other time I admitted it so I got to see Johnny Cash, who also went there.
Wow.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, did he go at the same time you did?
We did not know each other. I think I preceded him by a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And I met him here at the Civic Center, and he was quite a gentleman.
Okay, now, I know, I'm not sure if broadcasting schools are still around today, but how long of a course was that?
I think 90 days. Maybe it was longer than that. Mm-hmm. But I took what I learned, and when I really didn't learn my craft until I came to KTIB.
Okay. Well, that's the next question. Before we get to KTIB, did you have any other kind of jobs for coming here?
Yes, I worked at KTIB-AM in West Memphis, Arkansas, and met B.B. King there. He didn't work there. He worked at WDIA in Memphis, but we were just across the river. And I met Bob Prather, who used to be at Wink in Baton Rouge. I don't know where he is now. And it was a good learning time, but it wasn't serious enough, I think I want to say. But they really had some exciting talent.
When you were there, wasn't Wink Martindale on television there?
Yeah, but I never knew him.
Okay.
I was strictly radio and never television. The Howlin' Wolf. That's who I was trying to think of.
Okay.
I get so tickled now. Mm-hmm. I pick up things and they talk about B.B. King being a legend and the Howling Wolf. Well, these people are all around Memphis. And Elvis, we used to see him with his shocking pink or chartreuse pants. Mm-hmm. And we'd stand around and watch him. I mean, we just thought he was wonderful. But you didn't dare talk to him. It was that kind of idol worship, I guess. But he was never at KTIB-AM. There was a black musician called, I'm not sure if it wasn't Bobby Blue Bland.
That's it.
Yeah, I said, but I look back on that now, and it is amazing the wonderful people that were in and out of Memphis at that time. And I said, really, if I had realized, I could have had a lot of good connections. But I made my connections along the way.
So basically, did you migrate from Memphis to Thibodaux just to work for KTIB?
Yes, I did. In Memphis, all I could do was the program logs, which is scheduling the commercials for people who don't know. And it really wasn't until I went to, I did a little news at KTIB, but it was when I went to KHOM that I truly got into news. And then when I came back to KTIB, then I hit my stride.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, you joined KTIB, when was that? You said in 54?
Yes, November 15th, 1954 was my first day in Thibodaux.
Okay, well, and I guess one question I should have asked before is, how did you first come in contact? Was it through an ad looking for employees, or did you call?
No, the manager of KTIB when I came here was Hal Benson. His real name was Al Benzabat Jr. He and his wife and children were here. I used to babysit for them in Memphis. And so I was looking for a job in radio. My nickname was Junior. I don't admit that very often. He said, well, Junior, come on down here. So I came down. Unfortunately, he died shortly after I got here. But I had found my niche. This was the place I wanted to be. I met my husband here, was married here, and stayed. Mm-hmm. And this is home now.
Right. Now, what were your first impressions, when you first met the owners, such as Mr. Block and Mr. Jackson and all of them?
Fear. They were awesome. They were among the community leaders. But when I tell you that I was actually afraid of them, I kid you not. Mr. Jackson owned the newspaper with Mr. Silverberg. And, of course, Mr. Block owned the furniture store. He then owned Ellis Bro. He stood in my office and talked about starting a savings and loan because no one at that time paid dividends. So he started First Federal. And it was kind of nice to be in on the ground floor of all this stuff. But I held them all in awe. I really did.
Now, I believe, was it after the first manager died? Is that when Mr. Sadie came in?
Well, actually, the second manager. Hal was the second manager. And, yes, there was another one, Don Gatz. He was also our engineer. And he left and went to California, and that's when Raymond came in.
Okay. What were your impressions when you first met him?
Well, again, I held him in awe, I think. Raymond and I learned to respect each other because we're both kind of hard-headed. He's Lebanese, I'm Italian, and tend to be hard-headed nationalities. But I learned to respect. Raymond taught me many, many things, and I've never forgotten that. And we would have our arguments. And I kid you not, we had plenty of them. But I always would bow. No, I wouldn't. I was going to say I bow to his will. That's not always true. But we kind of understood each other.
Mm-hmm. Now, weren't originally the first studios above the Daily Comet?
Yes, they were. See, when I first started, all I did, like I said, was the paperwork. So I was stuck in that office doing program logs when I really wanted to be out on the street selling advertising or on the air or doing news. So I was kind of frustrated at certain turns in my life.
Now, in '68, when Mr. Sadie started KHOM, did you go along with him when he started up?
Well, I waited 3 months, and then I went.
Okay.
And that was really one of the best decisions I ever made. KHOM was just starting out, and we could kind of flex our muscles and be a little bit different. And they were committed to local news, and I really got caught up in that. Although I went to work there in the office, doing the program logs, what I'd always done, sending out the bills, writing commercials. But there was enough news interaction that I really loved it. And I hate to say, when we had the riots in Thibodaux, I came over to cover news, and that did it. I was hooked. Mm-hmm. Absolutely hooked.
Now, he told a story, wanted to know how true it was, that when he moved over to KHOM, that there was a point where, and I hope I'm saying it right, that you didn't want to necessarily drive to Houma every day, and he offered to build you a satellite office that you could run in Thibodaux.
He didn't build it, but yes, I had a little office on St. Philip Street, I think. And because I did not want to drive back and forth to home anymore. The highways were too lane. Mm-hmm. And I had seen several very tragic wrecks another reason I was in news, I guess, because I'd stop and call them in. But then I felt like that maybe my number was coming up. And I didn't want to be on the road, because this job requires that you work some nighttime and all of that, at least the way we did it. So he rented this office. He and Mr. Buquet rented an office for me. And Kenneth Watkins, I don't want to forget Kenneth, who was then one of the owners. They rented this office for me. And I just felt like they had put so much confidence in me that I could never let them down.
Were there any stories the staff covered, including yourself, that just really seemed to stand out? I'm sure a lot of the storms you covered would be up there.
Yeah. The WOW fire, and I'm sure you've heard firemen talk about it. I had never been to a fire of that magnitude before, and my husband was a volunteer fireman. Well, my neighbor and I decided we'd go to the fire. It was Halloween night. And I got to thinking, can my husband be in that building? And then I said to myself, of course not. He wouldn't do that. Well, guess where he was? Of course he was in the building. But I took the tape recorder. I don't know where the news person was, but I wrote the story. You know, went up to the station, which was then where the sheriff's office is now, and did my story and put it on the air. And the next morning, Raymond said, "Who did the story about the fire?" And I kind of sheepishly put up my hand. I said, "I did." And I had done a good job. So it was like, I know I can do this. Watch out. One that does. And I don't know if I should tell this or not, but you get your baptism of fire out there. I was coming from somewhere, and I stopped where the old shopping bag used to be. And there were all kind of police cars. And so I went over to see what was going on. And there was a dead man laying out there. He had drowned in the bayou. So I went in, I'm going to do a story, right? My hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't dial the station's number. And I put my hands in my pocket. Well, I dialed the phone and stuck my hands in my pocket so no one could see me. Well, I had to ask them at shopping bag, can I use your phone? I mean, that was before cell phones. So I used their phone and called it in. Never shook so bad in my whole life. But that taught me how to keep my act together. And then years later, I would tell younger reporters, you're allowed to cry, but only at the office and only when you're finished. Because you can't do a good job if you're crying.
Now, of course, I also remember in the mid-'80s when we had the Schriever overpass collapse. That must have been one memorable one.
Yes, well, I'll predate you a little bit. I was on my way to KHOM, and they were delivering the slabs for the overpass, okay? And one of the trucks bumped the back end of one of the other trucks and sent that slab into, there wasn't a building there, but into all these utility poles. Well, the driver was very badly injured, and I stopped at one of those grocery stores and called that in. And it was amazing how many things happened on my way to work.
Just counting LeFou's terrible, without a doubt, I'm sure the covering of some of the tropical systems have to stand out as well.
Yeah, Hilda was our preview for Betsy. They happened in less than a year. And Mr. Sadie was in the Bahamas for Hilda. So Mr. Block came up to help us do this hurricane. And my husband ran back and forth to the transmitter, which was then at Schriever, bringing gasoline out there. And then Mr. Block kept saying, get off the phone, get off the phone. Well, I'd wait till he went in the back and I'd pick up the phone because, I mean, you got to be able to call people to find out what's going on. And he would come back and look at me and laugh because he knew what I had done. But that was our learning night. We learned that night. And then Betsy was like, oh, well, here we go again. But Mr. Sadie was back for that one. So, and you cannot believe how people praised us for those two storms. And that's when you feel like you are really doing a good job. I don't remember which storm it was. I think it was Betsy, though. Lucy Gorey had us go out to the Thibodaux High Stadium, and they played music for us, and we were the honored guests, the KTIB staff. And at that time, the newspaper and the radio didn't get along too good, but the newspaper even mentioned what a good job we had done. And it's things like that that make you work around the clock 3 nights straight, even with some people hollering at you, which you always have. But when you realize the good that you're doing, then it's all worth it.
The one predominant thing people are going to know you for forever is dialogue. How did that show come about, and when did it first come on?
We did Radio Roundtable at KHOM. And so when I came back to KTIB, we decided we'd do dialogue. It was then in the noon hour. And we would carry some of the KHOM interviews, but they were mainly Lafourche Parish, the ones done at KTIB. And I interviewed Eddie St. Marie one time and absolutely lost control of the whole program. But dialogue was really special to me. I met so many very interesting people, governors, congressmen. Well, that was, I was going to say the brother of the president, but that wasn't on dialogue in any way. He went to jail. It was Richard Nixon's brother. I just felt as though I knew, I had my pulse on the world with that program. And I don't know if Billy Tosan will like me saying this or not, but I've known Billy since he was in high school. I used to get my hair done at his cousin's beauty parlor, so we would see him often. But when I didn't have anyone for dialogue, I'd open that balcony door and look out, and if I saw Billy, I'd go holler, "Hey, Billy, dialogue's open. You want to come do dialogue?" And he'd holler back, "I'm on the way." But we always had an easy give and take, even when we didn't agree with each other.
Right.
But I do want to say about dialogue that I had some very, very good reporters that worked with me. Margaret Dubuisson, for one, and Polly Armstrong, who is now on the city council. Oh, it's whatever that town is across the bay from San Francisco. And people like that. I mean, we had first-rate people. And Billy used to get in the biggest arguments with Polly that you have ever heard. And Murray Dennis was a reporter. I mean, we had first-class talent.
By the way, Roy Pugh wanted to remind me, when you mentioned Eddie St. Marie, one of the shows where he lost control, was that the one about the UFOs in the Bruley Swamp?
Oh, no. That was on tape. My son was in, I want to say, junior high. And Mr. Taylor was his science teacher, Bill Taylor.
It might have been Jim Taylor.
Jim Taylor, you're right. And my son came home and said, "Mama, we're going to the Bruley Swamp. Mr. Taylor's taken all of us." And I said, "Well, you're not going anywhere till I find out what this is about." So I took my little tape recorder the next day and go tromping over to the sheriff's office And I asked all my usual contacts, and they said, well, no, you got to talk to the sheriff. So I go into Eddie's office. Now, I knew Eddie, okay? But this was a totally different thing. This was not, oh, friendly Eddie St. Marie. So I started asking him questions, and I had the tape recorder going. Well, I couldn't believe what he was telling me. You know, I mean, this was the best play I had ever heard. And I got back to the office, and I called Anna Slade, who did news at KHOM in Terrebonne Parish. And I said, listen to this. Do I have anything here? She said, oh, my God, Marie, that's wonderful. So we put it on the air. That was before we had KTIB. We put it on the air. And people are calling and asking us to play it again. And we cut it down into a news story. But that wasn't enough. They wanted to hear the full thing. And I thought that was so odd. But yeah, he knew what he was doing. And he knew how to capture an audience and how to hold them. And all I did was go duh and hand him the microphone, you know, a few times. But he was a special person. I'm not sure that he could survive in the world today. But he told somebody one time that I was really tough. Well, I could never be really tough with him. I mean, he took it away from me. But he was very interesting, and he used to call me Miss Marie, as in Saint Marie.
Well, one of your annual features on Dialogue many parents and kids alike look forward to was having Santa Claus. I guess the best way to ask this question is, who was Santa's friend that got him on the air for you?
Well, I mean, if you had to use a little force, having a Thibodaux policeman do it for you was pretty good. Wayne Degg would always get Santa Claus for me. And, of course, Wayne passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a good friend of mine and the community.
How long did that last, the Santa Claus segments on your show? I know it's how many years?
Oh, you would ask me that. I'm sure we did that some 10 or more years, if not longer than that. It seems like we did them forever. But one of my great failings was that I never committed any of this stuff to paper. So I don't really remember.
Okay. Well, the next question is about someone you brought up earlier. Many people give you the credit for starting the career of Margaret Dubuisson. How did you two first meet, and how was the working relationship?
Well, Roy Pugh deserves some of the credit there. Roy actually hired Margaret. Roy was the station manager, and I was the news director. And Margaret and I had our words at first until we learned to respect each other, which we did. And she asked me one time if I still had that red pen. And I don't, but I did for a long time. And you would get this mark across your paper, you know, if it was too long or whatever. But Margaret had the talent and the ability, and you could tell it from the first time she walked in the door. There was an accident again at the Shreva Overpass involving an 18-wheeler. Margaret went out there, and she came back, and she was very upset because the driver had been badly injured. And I said to her, you can't cry at the scene. You can come back here and you can cry. She had to go to the hospital to be sure he was going to be all right. And I told her, I said, don't get that close ever again. Because people don't believe it, but those things hurt us. We are human, and yeah, you know, you can really let things get to you, but you can't do your job if you let them get to you. So you have to learn to kind of sniffle maybe a little bit if you have to and just keep going.
How long did you stay at KTIB before moving on?
Oh, Margaret was at KTIB a good 5 or 6 years. She could not make up her mind if she wanted to be in sales or in news. And she said to me when she left, and the reason she left is her then husband, Ricky, had been accepted to dental school in New Orleans, and she had to leave. And she did say to me that she thought there would always be room for news, but she didn't know about sales, something like that. And so she went on to news, and of course Channel 8 hired her after she worked at a news station in New Orleans for a little while.
Which I believe was WGSO, if I remember. Well, there's quite a few people you worked with over the years, and I tried to go down the list of people who, at least I was familiar with. And one gentleman, Mr. Sadie, spoke highly of, especially when you and him first met this particular employee, Darren Fonts.
Oh, yeah. Look, Darren was such a natural and just really a great guy. And the voice preceded the individual. I don't know if you know Darren. Darren is short, forgive me, Darren, but you're short, like I am. But he has this great voice and this great delivery, and he's probably one of the best sports people that I have ever known. But I hired him on the spot.
And then, of course, the gentleman we mentioned earlier who was actually a first-class engineer when he came in, Roy Pugh.
Yes. Roy and I got along very well, and as closely as we worked, you had to get along well, or you'd kill each other. Because let's face it, to be in radio, you have to have this ego thing. And I have the world's largest ego. Roy's is second, maybe, to mine. But yeah, I have a lot of respect for Roy, and I think he does for me.
Now, of course, one gentleman who really was a broadcast veteran as well, who made his name, I guess, at both of the stations in the area, Roy Vicknair.
Knows more about music than any human being you have ever met. Roy, give him a job and he'll go do it. But when it comes to music, he was a true expert.
Well, one gentleman who knew a lot about music, especially over the weekends, Leroy Martin.
Yeah, Leroy is one of my best friends, and I look back, Leroy and I picked Roger Miller as a winner the first time we heard his record. And not everyone did at that time. But Leroy always said he would, every time he wrote a new song, he would try it out on me. If I didn't like it, it was destined to be a hit. But if I liked it, it was a dud.
Well, one gentleman I know had a lot of character in him, especially when he did Swap Shop, Les Dome.
Yeah, Les was, I think, more of a musician than a broadcaster. I don't know how to term him. But no one could do Swap Shop like he did. No one at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, do you remember the story about the woman who called saying she had a dog available for stud service?
No.
His reply was, well, ma'am, is it a male or a female?
That's all right. He had a lady on one time who was from, I want to say Minnesota or something like that, and he said, welcome to the United States. He was one of a kind.
Yeah. Well, one guy I don't have on the list who Roy Pugh spoke real highly of, Jimmy Cole.
Yes, Jimmy is now in Lafayette, and Jimmy was one of those guys you could depend on to do everything. And I think he's even been in sales now. So he's run the whole gamut.
Well, a gentleman that you brought in or helped to bring in the late 90s who had a little bit of experience, he mainly loved sports, but he did a lot of news, David Salzman.
Oh, David was wonderful. David, the only thing that held him up was he couldn't find an apartment. So I said, well, I tell you what, I got an empty bedroom and has a private bath. So he lived here for 6 months till he could find an apartment. And we got along beautifully. You know, he was younger than even my son. But I think his professionalism, and we had, the first year he was here, 2 storms?
4 in the Gulf, the 2 that affected us.
And I mean, I went in and woke him up and said, "You got to go to the station. We have a hurricane." So I think he was sorry he lived here. But no, David is a first-rate person, and I would call him a class act.
Now, one person that y'all brought in towards the end of your tenure, who's still with the station today, Linda Bellinger.
Yeah, well, Linda is truly getting her feet wet, if I can put it that way. And she told me one time that someone accused her of trying to be me. And, hey, if she succeeds, maybe she'll be better than me.
Mm-hmm. Now, one gentleman, I hate to bring up his name because I don't know what's going to come out, but it just seems like we're always making jokes about him, and he just flings them right back at us, Chuck Botwell.
Oh, Chuck is great. Chuck is great. Chuck has this very strange personality, this little quirkiness, but he is dependable as can be. If Chuck says, "I'm going to be there, I'm going to do that," he will. And he even learned to do news, and he's just been a joy.
Now, something that I almost forgot about till I came up here, and that was, were you in charge of the various contests that you used to have over the years, like the turkey shoot or the reindeer races or the Name the Fire company?
At various times. Jimmy Cole did a lot of that. Roy Pugh did a lot of that. There were certain contests that eventually died because people would get too involved in them. Mm-hmm. The fire call was one of them I think you were thinking about.
Right.
We had to take it off.
Okay.
The phone company asked us to. We tied up all the Thibodaux lines, and people learned that you could dial all the digits except one and tie up the line.
Ah.
Well, I mean, we had all these fire companies competing with each other. Mm-hmm. Well, you couldn't make a phone call in or out of Thibodaux.
Wow.
So we had to drop that one.
Now turkey shoot has run for an awful long time.
Yeah, turkey shoot is another. I think Mr. Sadie found turkey shoot, or found out about it.
Okay.
And then we developed our own turkey shoot. And it's like the reindeer races. Mm-hmm. You know, he found that somewhere, and we developed our own reindeer races. But people always love the contest.
I take it in working in radio all those years must have been very rewarding.
Yes, it was. Radio is an awesome business. You see the very best of people, and you see the worst of people. I mean, I'll be honest about it. There was a man one time who was angry because he had no electricity after a storm. Mm-hmm. And what he didn't tell me, you wouldn't believe. And finally I said, "Well, sir, if I could get your electricity back on, I'd get mine on." And he said, "What do you mean? You don't have electricity?" I said, "No." And it's so funny, they think that we had, all this power, but I couldn't get my lights on. And we were burning up just like everyone else.
Well, there I bring it up. You're talking about an angry caller. I think we better, well, I'm not sure if you want to mention it or not, but the time Mr. Sadie decided to change the format from established country to more easy listening, and I guess, I don't know if he made you, but you had to do the promo and got all the blame.
Hey, he was the boss. And I have to say, when he decided to change from easy listening to early rock, I told him he could do the promo. So that'll give you an idea of what it was like. I was the most hated person in this town. And people let me know it.
Oh, I take it over all those years at both stations, there just probably too many funny moments to recount, whether it's somebody calling in or something with the news. There's just probably too many of them.
Yeah, and I don't, like I said, I wish I had written everything down. I don't remember a lot of them. I will tell you this. I mean, I may take little jabs at Mr. Sadie, but I always said I had one real brother and then I had Raymond Sadie. And I mean that because he allowed me to learn my craft, and he'd give me the ball and I'd run with it.
Well, I'll tell you what, we can't thank you enough for your time today, and like I said, as we continue the series, we're just bringing up so many memories a lot of us, just didn't know about, and we really appreciate all your time.
Well, thank you for asking me. Sometimes I wish I was back up there, but then I know it's time for new people and new ideas.
Well, if you listen to Gene long enough, everybody would want you back up.
Well, Gene is a special friend.
Marie Bergeron, another marquee example of KTIB